everybody to the Transit Coalition dinner meeting. We have meetings every 3 or 4 weeks with different speakers. Transit Coalition is a nonprofit, and we do educational programs, transportation advocacy, land use planning, and goods movement. Tonight we have Abdullah Ansari as our speaker on roads, and Metro, of course, has a probably $1 billion road program, among other things. And so, just to mention, we have meetings every 3 to 4 weeks. Upcoming meetings that we have is later this year we have the West Santa Ana branch, we have Metrolink CEO, we have East Los Angeles Light Rail, we have the Valley to the West Side Rail Tunnel, whatever it may actually be. We also have some more projects, so Van Nuys Boulevard Light Rail. So we have a number of projects coming through where we have speakers coming. So I want to welcome everybody to our meeting tonight. We are looking for sponsors, so if your company, when you register at the top of the registration, it's just a matter of registering for a sponsorship, and that would be greatly appreciated. As I said, our next meeting after this one is going to be East Los Angeles Light Rail, and then Metrolink CEO, and then the other meetings I mentioned. So I want to welcome you, everybody. So our speaker knows everybody here. We're going to start with introductions. So we'll start with this gentleman right here. Speaker tonight has been with Metro for a few years. I believe you're also a college professor?
Yes.
So he's got a varied career and has been in the road world for a long time, and the transit world for a long time. So I want to welcome Abdullah tonight, and come on up and tell them a few little bits about yourself, and then we'll go from there. Welcome.
Can you hear me so I can float? Not stay at the podium. Well, I know practically all of you. And thanks for showing up. So for everybody who is here tonight, you get 5 points in the next interview. My job is pretty much managing Metro's highway program. It's not the mainstream part of Metro. Obviously, Metro has always been a primarily transit agency. The highway group in Metro was very limited to funding everybody else's projects. This is actually my second stop at Metro. I was here between 2000 and 2005. Came from Caltrans. First 18 years of my professional life was with Caltrans, right out of college. Came here for about 5 years and then left in 2005, went to manage the Transportation Bureau in City of Long Beach, and then went consulting for about 8 years or so, and then came back here in 2015, and still here, which is a good thing. So I'm going to give you a presentation on the highway program at Metro, which is now amazingly huge, nothing close to what it used to be. And it's getting bigger by the day. More and more projects are coming. You've seen our progress in the past 5 years. A lot of work, a lot of contracts have been awarded. We are trying to make it easy to get contracts, and also easy to do contracts. We are in with you, every contract that you get, myself and my staff, and making it easy to make the project happen. Same thing with our communication with the agencies, local, state, regional, everybody who is involved in this business. We are moving towards making this profession easier than it was in the past. A lot of overhead, a lot of expenses, and everything has to do with deficiencies. If everybody understands that all of us should push for the same goal, it's not about the authority, it's not about who can kill somebody else's project or make it more difficult on somebody else to do the project, then we're home. Between us and Caltrans, we are building a very good relationship. John Walensky, the new district director, is amazingly good, a lot better than what we experienced in the past few years. Leadership, vision, cooperation, understanding, and all of that. So we talk a lot. about the issues, about what needs to be done to get the work done, for both them and us. So I'm going to go over this for you, give you a good background on what's in progress and what's ahead. And again, if you have any questions at the end, I'll be happy to answer all of your questions. So I used to go all projects. Here's what we do, here's what you're going to be seeing and all of that. But lately I started a little bit before we get to the project on why it needs to be done. There are notions out there, and you see from your side of the industry, why are we even doing highways? Why aren't we shifting people to other modes? So I added a few information slides to this of why we are doing it and why do we have to do this. I mean, there's no choice in this. Also, the necessity of the highway system. The system is carrying bulk of the trips, so it makes perfect sense to invest in it. Not investing in it and not having invested in it enough in the past is where we are today with the congestion. So the significance of what this system is all about. So we want to talk about how bad it is. Here's a comparison of what 405 used to be and what 405 is. And it's not going to get any better. If anything, it's just getting worse by the day. Huge amount of traffic demand on our infrastructure. And I put in some trends in here. You see here where the traffic demand has picked up. On the left slide between 1960 and 2013, you see how the volume of automobile demand picks up on the roadways. And then right below that, on the lighter blue, these are lone drivers, single occupancy vehicles. And then down below you see carpooling. And then at one time you had van pooling. And at one time there was a study that said life of a van pool was about 18 months. And when you go back and ask why, it's not convenience, it's necessity. If you live in this area, Central Los Angeles Basin, the greater LA, you live at one point. The school that you want your kids to go to is here. Your work is there, and your shopping is here. And that doesn't happen on any other mode. It's the necessity. You need to drive. Nobody enjoys getting stuck in traffic for hours. If you didn't need to do it, you wouldn't do it. If you're a consultant, you need to be all over the place, visiting one client in one place, job centers in different places, your partners and other firms, prime or sub, in some other places, clients and all of that. So that extensive demand is not going to happen on any other mode because there is no coverage. You're still stuck with the coverage that the roadway network is giving. So when you look at the statistics at the tail end of that era in 2013, this is what the statistics in this area is. And there is no question that you do have a problem of cars and you do have a problem of drivers, lone drivers in cars, and it has to be accommodated. You can't ignore, look the other way and say it's not going to happen. In the past couple of decades, there was this notion of if you build it, they will come. We didn't build them, but they came. So that didn't work. Makes sense to start understanding what the problem is and addressing it. If you address it, you have done something positive. If you ignore it, things don't happen the way we want them to happen. Things happen the way they happen. So it's a little bit of philosophy behind this, but that's the reality of it. So the expectation is for industry to understand it, decision makers to understand it, consultants to promote it. Consultants are consultants. A lot of times we get consultants who will do the work, but they don't offer consultant services. The client needs to learn. The client has a vision, has a program, has a responsibility. The consultant should come to the table and say, this is not the way to do business. This is a better way to do business. Your problem in this corridor is not this. Your problem in this corridor is this. And that's the solution. But rarely you see consultants coming in here that you have to promote highways, because highways are needed. You have to address congestion because it's there and it's getting worse. So that's the partnership that we have to have in place, all of us together. Again, more trends. This is increasing commute times for US workers. Look at it from 1990 to 2017, going up. This is from the Census Bureau. Look at this. Top US cities with longest commute. On the top 10 list, we own 4 positions. In a wrong way, but we own it. 1, Palmdale. 4, Corona. 6, Santa Clarita. 8, Moreno Valley. And you see the minutes of the trip. 85.5 minutes travel from Palmdale out. So you see percent of cars, 92% of the daily vehicles, daily trips are happening by cars. And then we go to the other modes. Same thing with Corona, coming from the inland side, 24% and 74 minutes of travel. And this is just on the average side. God forbid if you have an incident, shutdown, and everything that happens every day. And there is, in some areas, there is no way out. You've seen lately, several times, that there were incidents on I-5 coming from Santa Clarita. Where do you go? There is no other place because you're stuck. So safety, risks, incidents, emergency evacuation of any area, these are all happening on the roads. If you don't have them, nobody goes anywhere. This is another statistics in 2015. 73% of the trips in this area was driving alone. Look at the rest of that pie. There's no comparison of what the demand is. So it's nothing to be ignored. It has to be addressed. Again, America's top congested freeways in 2015. 405, 10, 101, and 110. And we know it, because we all travel it. It's in the neighborhood. More statistics, 2017. These are the hours spent in congestion, and we hold rank 1, Los Angeles, California, 112, compared to the rest of the metropolitan areas in the nation. This other one, similarly, these are the hours spent in congestion, but global. You're rank 1 in that too. So it's amazing how the load is on the system and how the system is failing. So what went wrong in our area? Up here, I'm showing 3 factors that were critical to what happened. One is the population growth, exponentially growing in Southern California and in LA County. The move started to go to the suburbs. Distances became longer. Affordable housing, new subdivisions, people move out, but the jobs never went with them. Land use policies, foundation of the congestion that we see on the roadways. When developers come in, it's all about where is affordable, where is profitable. So when you go out, the more out you go, the worse it gets. Now longer trips, more congestion. The other one is the vehicle miles traveled. Obvious. If you go out, you travel more miles. So how do you address that? The options in many corridors are not available. Transit is not necessarily going to the same destinations that people need to go. So stays with the cars. The other one was gas tax revenues that went down. Not enough allocations, not enough support for that. You don't have money, you don't build projects. The next one is the historic STIP programming levels. And you see how it started going on between 2000 and 2016, declined. Not enough money invested in the system. You don't build it, population and travel demand exceeds the capacity. The other factor was processes and decisions. We have such a complicated way of doing business. Going through all of the approvals, going through multiple agency engagements without sharing a common goal. Transportation agency needs to build a roadway. You get stuck with resource agencies, regulatory agencies, permits, everything, all reviews after reviews and after reviews, and only problems. To the point that it becomes an impasse. We go through environmental processes, and in the past several decades. Complicated environmental processes for no absolute reason. Regulatory agencies make their policies and put their demands based on what they perceive is priority. Transportation agency has different priority. I gotta get people from point A to point B. So when I get stuck in the environmental process, I can't walk out of it. The cost of doing business is getting higher. Lack of education brings more objection to the cause rather than support. Everything fails. The other thing is the attitude of NIMBYs, not in my neighborhood. Okay. You want to build a freeway, go build it on the other side of the town. I don't want to see a freeway near me. But people need to go through your area to wherever they want to go. So objections, you can't widen it, you can't elevate it, no going up, no going down, no going out, there is no place to go. So that attitude is also a project killer. That's not going to happen. So a lot of friction. The reason Metro got into the highway business, because ordinarily it was the state DOT's business, Caltrans's. When SB 45 happened in 1997, 75% of the authority of funds was taken away from Caltrans and given to the locals. But the fact that there are so many local jurisdictions and it needs to be unified process, then the authority of programming these funds that were taken away from Caltrans authority were given to RTPAs, agencies like us, OCTA, SBCTA, county agencies. So that's the time that Metro got into the business of funding and programming highway projects. This is what we're doing to alleviate these problems. In my group, we are committed to everything you see here. First of all, do a need assessment. What needs to be done and how? We did a rough ballpark estimate of what needs to be done in the county. It's about $75 billion. What we have about $8 billion in Measure R in highways and about $21 billion in Measure M. So even with $30 billion, which is a lot of money, we are not even halfway there. So it makes perfect sense to push for efficiency, to invest the money to the value of the money. Buy as much as you can with every dollar that you're investing. Multi-agency program coordination, we sit down and talk to agencies, local, regional, state DOT, Caltrans. How can we improve the processes? How can we minimize the friction? How can we work together to get this done? It's not about who does it, it's about how we do it. So the efficiencies are extremely important. We do fund projects, local, cities, county, Caltrans, and we also pick up responsibility of doing the work that anybody else cannot do. We have offered help to Caltrans. We picked up a lot of their projects in the past 4 years. We are delivering Caltrans projects for the first time. We are actually going to construct a Caltrans project, the I-5 project. I'm going to be talking about it. And then with the cities, we are offering the cities the projects that we funded, your projects. If you don't have resources, don't sit on those. Give it back, we'll do it. We'll bring it up to construction, you hand it over, you go build it. So whatever it takes to get it done. As a result of that, the hope is that we improve the regional mobility. Can't solve it, but at least do some benefit, tangible benefits. Also creating jobs and improving the economy. And for those of you who are involved with our program, you've seen the progress in the past 5 years. Multiple contracts back to back have been released. A lot of you are working on those projects, and more is coming. So the first good thing that happened here was Measure R. And with Measure R came 2 programs. One, projects that are the responsibility of Metro to deliver, and then the sub-regional projects. At the time that Measure R happened, there were 3 primary areas, as you see on this map, that We didn't have any major projects identified. So we placed funds in those areas as a lump sum allocation to those subregions, with the hopes of later getting together with the subregions and start programming projects in those areas. So primary focus of Measure R was building the highway system, whether sub-regional or the projects. So far, our progress is shown on the right-hand side in what was supposed to be green. I think it shows blue on this. And then yellow is in progress. But everything is in one phase or another or completed. But there is nothing idle in there. In Measure M, 19% of the funds were allocated to the highways, but 2 slices were cut out of those 2%, one for active transportation and one for system connectivity. The rest of that 15% is dedicated to the highways. And this is a combination of what we do internally and what the other agencies do with the funds that we allocate, especially the subregions. For those of you who have seen the expenditure plan for the sales tax measure and also the ordinance, what you see in the expenditure plan, there are 2 tables. One is this, that shows major highway projects that Metro does. And I've highlighted the highways as opposed to the transit projects. So those, everything you see in those blue boxes is highways. And then there is the sub-regional allocations, which is the other table, and identifies the list of the projects. When you look at the right-hand side of that table in the expenditure plan, it's either H for highway or T for transit. So you can tell where the money is nested, for what purpose. And the first year of construction that is planned for these projects, and that's the first year that the funds will flow according to the ordinance and expenditure plan, but we give it about 3 years lead time to start the pre-construction phases of those projects. So a lot of projects, a lot of work. What we have in progress is close to $14 billion investment in different phases of projects. You have major environmental processes going on corridor level. You have minor environmental processes on project-specific level. One of the things that we've done for efficiency, in the highway side, we no longer do corridor environmental studies. It doesn't serve any purpose. On the corridors that we do work, 710 North, $5 billion for 4 miles of freeway. 710 South, 18 miles for environmental process. It's been stuck in environmental process for over 12 years. 710 North was 60. So 605, we started lessons learned. Before we started the corridor environmental process, we started the early action projects that we could easily clear in environmental process with bare minimum friction. Okay? And that's the trend that we're going to follow from this point on. If we don't have $8 billion, you're not going to open an environmental process for an $8 billion project. Whatever the money can buy, that's what we're going to clear. That way, we can actually get to work. Otherwise, for all the time that you're stuck in these processes, the money is losing value. Purchase power is diminishing. At the end, you're not buying anything. So the idea is to get in and out of projects as quickly as possible. With your help, consultants helping, come in, wrap it up. I mean, the project should not take long. We tag along with all of you. Every one of you who has a contract with us knows it. Myself and my staff, my project managers, we go to all meetings with you. We guide you through the process. There is no barrier. We try to dodge everything that is coming at you by demands from the other agencies on plan check processes and everything. We do the negotiations. The whole idea is to get in and out as quickly as possible, get the project in place. So the first project that we picked up, it's a 14-mile HOV project, including 4 miles of truck climbing lane at the 14-5 interchange. It's between Santa Clarita and Castaic. And we are done with the final design. We got final approval from Caltrans. We are finalizing the environmental pieces on it and planning to go to construction picked up the responsibility for this project as well as 6 other projects coming right at the tail end of this on different corridors. We will do construction. We didn't have a highway construction group. Now we started putting resources under our construction division. We are hiring CMs as staff, and then we are also building a CM contract for this one, and most probably a bench for construction management that we can issue task orders as soon as these projects come out. Save time on contract processes. Very quickly, get everything out of the project. So next spring, the bid package is going to be released, and we are hoping to go to construction next summer. Probably going to be a 4 to 5 year construction. Probably about $450 million price tag in construction. It's a great project. What we do now is during the design phase, we do quality assurance, quality control, risk assessment, and value analysis. Making sure that we are minimizing the risk margin. So when we go to construction, construction is not going to get tangled. Changes are not that frequent as opposed to the 2 construction projects that are now out there, and pretty much account for whatever can be accounted for in final design. Minimize the losses in construction. Be able to wrap up these projects. We have allocated over $200 million for 10 interchange improvements in Palmdale and Lancaster in North County. One of them is already in construction. We're working with both cities of Palmdale and Lancaster to push the other projects as fast as possible to get to construction. High Desert Corridor in North County. This was a long process of environmental documentation. And at the end, the outcome was not anything practical to build. The outcome was 6 to 8 lane freeway, a 40-mile energy corridor, linear energy corridor, bicycle lane along the freeway, and a rail right away for high-speed rail connection. We re-evaluated this project when it ended, and we discussed it with the JPA and with the electeds and with our management. And going forward, we talked to SBCTA, and we think we can do a much smaller, most cost-effective project on 18, Highway 18 in San Bernardino, which is going to be the extension of 138 in LA County by widening that road instead of building a brand new freeway. And we believe that based on the information that we have gathered, that will do for the next few years to come, not mandating a major freeway construction. So again, it's all about efficiency, what will do the job. So SBCTA is now going to be the project manager for that. We will be contract managers. We are developing the scope of work together with Caltrans District 7 and 8, and you're going to see that RFP coming out very soon, in the next few months. Finishing 3 pieces on 138 in LA County, and when you look at the map, this is Highway 14, you go through Palmdale, Llano, all of those areas, you get to the San Bernardino County line, and this is where Highway 18 is. So by the time we get to here, finishing these 3 remaining segments, that highway extension is going to satisfy a connection between Palmdale and Victorville that was the purpose and need statement of the High Desert Corridor. So consistent with what was envisioned at a lot less cost. Another project that we finished environmental document for was 138 Northwest. This runs in the northern part of the county, splits from I-5 and goes east. Again, environmental document was done. Past this point, Caltrans is going to step in and do some corrective measures, safety projects, rehab projects, and everything else in that area, but no other projects is envisioned in that area anytime soon. This is the infamous 710 North, the freeway gap in 710 between 10 and 210 freeways. We managed to wrap up the final environmental document, recommended selection of the TSM TDM, the Transmission System Management and Demand Management, as the preferred alternative. Most of you are aware of this project. This is a very long-standing project, 6 decades in environmental. Surface freeway was rejected, tunnel was rejected, and there was pretty much no reasonable agreement on an option for a major build. But in order to salvage the investment in this corridor and at least try to offset some of the expected traffic demand that is getting on the city streets, and no longer a freeway is going to be there to take that and correct that. We opened conversations with the cities in the corridor that are already impacted and will be impacted even further in the future, and decided to put the $1 billion that was already in the tunnel project onto the city streets. We went to the board last December with the recommendation for the first round of projects to a tune of almost $500 million. We are going to the board again this September for the rest of that money, and there will be $1 billion investment in this corridor for local improvement projects, congestion relief, mobility improvements, intersections, street widenings, anything that can pass the traffic in this corridor that no longer will have a freeway component to use. So expect in the next fiscal year, we start programming these projects. Our hope is that we can wrap up all the local projects within a 7-year to 10-year period maximum. So we are working with the cities, and again, the offer stands. If any city doesn't have resources, we will help them do the project. The goal is to get this done as quickly as possible. These are all one-time grant, small projects. When the rush hour freeway projects and transit projects start, it's hard to get bids on these size projects. So the hope is for the cities to get in and out of these projects as quickly as possible to make the best of the investment.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Question. All these projects you are mentioning are going to be design, bid, build
Yes.
projects? Or?
Yes. All of our highway projects are going to be design build. The problem is that we have to go through external agency plan checks, and we can't count on the turnaround time. So if we are stuck in that process, it's better for us to get stuck in design than in construction. So again, cost conscious and time saving. This is another large program that we are pursuing on 605, 5, and 91 corridors. Multiple projects. We are doing a major environmental study now between 105 and 10 on the 605 corridor. Everything you see on the right-hand side, these are the major projects that are going to happen, major interchange investments and all of that, way out in the future. But on the left side are the practical short-term projects, local interchange improvements, operational improvements. And 3 of those are ready to go to construction in 2020, and the rest of them following right after those. We are in one phase or another of these projects. So on accelerated schedule. Here is 710 South, again 18 miles of improvements in the environmental process, getting close to the end of it, between the ports on the south end and Highway 60 to the north where Hobart Yard is. We identified a preferred alternative, adding 1 lane to the freeway and improving the corridor, all interchanges included. With this project, obviously, somewhere between $6 and $11 billion is not an option. That money is not available. So the plan is to go again with the early action projects. We do have $1 billion between Measure R and Measure M in 710 corridor. And if we can bring any other grants from outside to supplement the funds, it's going to help a lot. But the plan of action is to go through this process as quickly as possible and start investing in those interchanges. We are in communication with the EPA, AQMD, Caltrans, and all the other agencies that are involved. Our hope is that we can come to an agreement on the final environmental document. If everybody agrees to what we have suggested, as far as the timing and the scope and extent of mitigation work, this corridor will be entirely improved. If there is an impasse, which we hope it's not going to be, but if there is one, we go back, revisit those local projects. We can do revised environmental clearances at much lower level of documentation and get those started. But one way or another, we will start investing in these corridors very soon. We also started on 405 freeway. For many years, the debate was widening the 405, and widening 405 was always in question because of the anticipated right-of-way impacts. So we pretty much did a very thorough assessment of the corridor, identified the areas that don't have any impact, and in fact, we can widen the freeway, provide aux lanes, relieve the congestion on the freeway, accommodate people and cars to get off the freeway as quickly as possible, weaving issues, resolve safety factors embedded in those projects. So we started doing environmental for these projects, very quickly going to design, and hopefully in about a year and a half to two in construction. Major work on South Bay Curve in the South Bay area. So we will see more contracts coming out of those 405 projects. 5760, what you see in red is the scope of the project that we are pursuing now. It's in final design. We have requested acceleration by the consultant and reviews by Caltrans, hoping to go to construction in 2022 or earlier if possible. There's a major deficiency in this area. As you look at the left side, 60 merges into 57, crosses over, and on the other side of the interchange, they change place. So a lot of weaving, high-speed weaving in this area and heavy congestion. So we are doing that correction to separate these moves, allow more distances for those weaves and reduce the accident or potential accident in that area. So pulling through to get it done and get it into construction by 2022. This is another project that Caltrans is doing on 71. We are funding the project. The two pieces that you see here, the cutoff line between phase 1 and phase 2 of the project is Mission. Southerly segment, the one in orange or brown, is going to be done first. Ready to go to construction next summer, finalizing the design on that. And then the north segment, which requires railroad coordination because of the crossings in that area. It's going to have a little bit of everything. Don is smiling, he understands.
Hey, we're from the road, we're here to help, right?
Yes. But 2020 and 2023, that project is going to be done. The segment that you see on the south side, the brown shaded area, it's an expressway. We are upgrading that to a full freeway standard, access control. Another part of our business is sound walls. Again, historically, Caltrans' responsibility to build sound walls. And two categories of sound walls that I'm going to be talking about. Cutoff year of 1998 with SB 45. Before that, it was Caltrans' responsibility. After that, became Metro's responsibility. Now, the two general categories, first were the projects that would be built or were built as part of a freeway project. If you do capacity enhancements, widen the project, you do need to do noise studies, and wherever it qualifies, you build the sound walls. The other one was the retrofit program. In the areas that freeways were built, but the sound walls were not built, now there was a requirement and mandate to go back and build those sound walls. So most of the work that we are doing and we've been doing requires the retrofit side of that process. Things that need to be considered, and again, you would figure it's a wall. What does it take to do a wall? An arm and a leg, in this case. So first you have to work out the geometric requirements, the lateral clearances, and all the standards within the Caltrans design manual that you have to comply with. And because of multiple widenings and elimination of the shoulders and narrowing the lanes and everything else to maximize the capacity, a lot of these features are no longer there. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of design and a lot of cost to try to figure out how to fit these walls in. Next is the alternative material. And it's very limited on how many alternative materials Caltrans has approved so far. So going forward, we are working with Caltrans to identify other types of walls materials and methodologies for installation to be able to do this less expensive. Right now, depending on where the wall is located, it's running about $10 to $20 million a mile. So adhering to all the standardizations and everything else, and with a limited amount of material that is allowed. Most of the walls that you see out there are reinforced masonry. So if we can get into more prefab material, lightweight material, and anything that does the job of attenuating the noise, that would enable us to build more. But at this time, it's about a $2 billion program, the money that we don't have, and the urgencies go to operational improvements, safety projects, capacity enhancement projects. Once we do those projects, the walls will be built with the project. But for retrofit side, that takes the next step to come up with funds to do this. So again, when you look at the priorities, phase 1 is already completed, about 2/3 of the way. What is in progress is what is in yellow, and what does not have funding, I'm showing it in red. So these are the locations that the walls have already been built in the county. And these are the ones that we are working towards building in the future. And that's the huge part of the program, the final phase, that there are no priorities in here. Any neighborhood who needs sound walls submits a request. We do site investigation, Caltrans or us will do noise readings, qualify it, add it to the list. But the list is only getting longer. We are also doing oversight management of projects that Caltrans is building, I-5 North and South. These are major projects. Orange County line is down here, I-5 South. Everything you see in green is already completed. Everything you see in orange with the percentages of completion should pretty much in the next 2-3 years wrap up. You have 98% done, 94% done. This is the last segment that started at Valley View, so it's going to take longer. In the north, there were 4 segments, 2 are done, and the other 2 should be done in the next 2 years. We do heavy oversight on that. We have funds in it, and we co-manage it with Caltrans. Other things that we do relative to technology, goods movement, we just recently involved in a truck platooning program. That is a program that using technology on board on the trucks connects the trucks to act like rail. So with minimum distance, you can put efficiency into the movement of goods. We get involved in a lot of improvements on the freeways that are primary truck routes for goods movement. I-5 is a good example of it. We also go after federal funds that are planned for goods movement improvements. We work with Ports of LA and Long Beach. I-710 is another good example of goods movement corridors. And then we do a lot of technology work. A part of my group under Steve Gota is all ITS dedicated, not only doing our own work, but helping Caltrans, local cities, coming up with projects that with the incorporation of technology, we can improve the operation of the freeway. Coupling local city streets parallel to the freeways with freeways. We do a lot of signal synchronization in the county. We work with the County of LA and also fund local projects for signal sync to improve mobility on the network. So this is our program, Highway. Be happy to answer your question. It's exciting. I'm enjoying it. It's not easy, but it shouldn't be. As Don says, you've got to earn your living. So I am doing that.
Yes, on the sound walls, what determines how high the sound wall has to be?
Bare minimum is the line of sight. So if you can block that, that's pretty much the bare minimum. But when we do noise studies, depending on the terrain conditions, what is lower, what is higher? Is it the freeway side or the residential side? And then the noise readings will determine how high that sound wall should be. So we install instruments out there, we do noise readings, and then we model that noise. And then you see where the projections are. In the corridors that you have trucks, that line of sight has to block this truck stacks with noise generators. With the vehicles, you can go lower, but could be any height as long as the studies justify that. Yes?
Could Caltrans compete for those sound wall projects?
Caltrans is no longer doing sound wall retrofit projects. So, but again, Caltrans is also not doing any more capacity improvement projects. So if we are doing all the widening on the freeways, the new walls, or the relocation of the existing walls is going to become our responsibility. But we do work with Caltrans Noise Group, and amazingly, that's a very nice group to work with. Very professional, turn on a dime. They do noise studies, we fund those, and they do the noise studies. We also do our own noise studies on different projects. And then they will review and approve what we design. Yes?
As somebody who lives in Castaic, I just want to tell you, I appreciate the idea of another 5 years of highway construction.
Anything for you.
5 years to look for
carpool buddy.
Anything, I know, you've been suffering for the.
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah.
it goes down
Yes.
to one lane, and they try and do it at night, but I leave my house at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I just heard 2 days ago on the radio that the lane closure was not lifted on time and
Yeah.
the cars started.
The last 2 days,
Wow.
it's been almost 6 o'clock.
You're not doing it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's all your fault.
You're not doing it. Yes. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you for the presentation. My question is going back to the I-5 project. So for I-5 North and South corridor, Metro did the oversight, Caltrans did the construction. Now this new section, Metro is going to do AAA and do advertise and all of
Yes.
that. And what is Caltrans? Is the
Oversight.
co-op? So co-op is already written?
The co-op is in progress. Yes, we are reviewing it. We need to customize some of these agreements to the advantage of the project. But for I-5 North, our goal was to finish final design and hand it over to Caltrans, but we ended up constructing the project. But Caltrans will be doing oversight on construction as well as on environmental monitoring. Because we do have a lot of mitigation work that we need to do on the environmental side, and they will do all the monitoring of that.
So the inspections is like planned out right now, like the source inspection, field inspection, Caltrans is doing oversight on everything, or Metro is gonna do some, Caltrans is gonna do some?
No, we're going to physically be the construction manager for the project. So everything contracted is through us. Overseeing contractors' operations is our responsibility. Caltrans is doing the check for compliance.
Like only IQA?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You talked about the Highway 18 widening. What phase of the project are you talking about? Is this like the PSR and?
We want to do a focused PSR PDS. We had discussions with Caltrans. They were thinking of maybe doing a corridor study, but we don't see any need for it because the corridor study was already done under high-visit corridor. Multimodality considerations are already done under high-visit corridor. We need a focused widening project that connects Victorville to Palm.
So that's the RFP you're talking about?
That's the RFP that is going to do. Yes. Yes.
With SB1, it's a new program, has there been talks between Metro and Caltrans about separating the priorities and how you guys are gonna work together?
Yes, under SB1, we can submit applications for funds for the projects that we propose. Obviously, it goes through competitive process with other jurisdictions. Caltrans has full control over the shop side of that, because there's 3 pieces in there. Shop is pretty much their maintenance and rehab program, and all the money goes to Caltrans on that. But on the competitive basis, on operational and capacity enhancement projects, is where we submit applications. Yes, Bill?
Yeah, kind of following up on the SB1 program, as you know, the cycles of SB1 funding, they're going to require multimodal studies for projects, and one's currently going on in Ventura County on the 101. And it's being funded by SCAG at the moment. Are there any other ones in LA County that may be coming down the road?
There will be. We are, in addition to our funds, we're going after a lot of state and federal funds. So some of the projects that you see here, they do have funding gaps, especially with the constraints that exist in Measure M. In Measure M, the condition is that you cannot advance a project to the financial detriment of another project. So the fact that most of these projects are partially funded, if we are accelerating these projects, we're going after those funds. So yes, we do the applications, justifying the scope, competitive applications to get money. And we got a lot of money from state on I-5 North, the HOV Lake project. We're going for the rest of those projects as well. Yes?
Speaking of HOV projects, my recollection is that apart from the highway program, there's a section in Metro that does congestion improvements?
Yes.
Or
Express lanes.
yeah. Do they focus exclusively on HOV to express lane conversion?
They do two things. One, starting express lane projects from scratch, and the other one is conversion. That group is under Shahzad Amiri, and one of the projects that they have upcoming is the conversion of I-10 HOV projects when the construction finishes, immediately to express lanes. There is also the study on 405 in Sepulveda Pass for express lanes that they're going to be conducting. And there is an overall study that Metro is going to initiate very soon on assessment of congestion pricing in various ways in LA County, all possible ways of congestion pricing. So they will see the effectiveness of that program.
Abdullah, isn't there also the 105 between the 405 and the 605?
Yes, yeah,
That's
right. And that project is proposed to have direct connectors to 605. Hopefully when we pass the environmental document, then there will be a proposal for express lanes on 605 as well. Yes?
But all of these HOV to express lane conversions, it's just a straight conversion. You're not actually increasing capacity and adding a second lane next to those.
The constraint is availability of right-of-way. You're not going to compromise an existing lane, multi-use lane. So if there is no room, we may most probably end up with one. But if the right-of-way allows it, then like in 605, one consideration is for 2 lanes.
I mean,
But a lot of places, they're
it's a matter of money, right?
It's a matter of money and also restriction on availability of right-of-way. Because otherwise, as soon
If
as
you have
you
enough money,
propose,
you can take care of that.
we do have money in a lot of places, we can't add an inch. It's community acceptance. And unfortunately, a lot of places, when it comes to right-of-way acquisition, there is no support for the project. Yes?
Well, high desert corridor, so what I understood there is it's being reallocated to a different existing pathway. What happens with the theoretical high-speed rail connector for the Desert Express to Palmdale?
That discussion is ongoing. It is ongoing. Virgin acquired
right.
Desert Express.
The Desert Express. And they are now looking into the extension from Victorville to Palmdale. They're doing their own studies. We're going to be looking into that as well. And the good thing with the high desert corridor is that originally, including the freeway, all 4 components, there was a need for acquiring 500 feet of right-of-way, all the way through the whole 40 miles. With the rail component, it's somewhere between 80 and 100 feet, which is tremendously smaller impact and cost of right-of-way acquisition. So when their plans actually advance and there is a commitment to this rail, and they are in conversations with high-speed rail and with the state, CalSTA, so pending a decision to invest to Palmdale, yeah, I'm sure Metro is going to get involved.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes?
Is the I-5 HOV project going to be continuous access full-time, or like 14, or is it going to be
That decision needs to be made because that hasn't been a very popular implementation in LA County. In District 7, primarily we need to get acceptance from Caltrans to do that. But it would be,
So it's being studied at the moment to see what the final configuration is going to be,
No.
or no?
no, but once we get there, then hopefully that works. Yeah, it's a long discussion on that.
So you mentioned earlier about the I-710 north, right, rest of the $500 million going to the board this September.
Yes,
Can you elaborate on that?
sure, $500 million.
Tell us more about that.
Yes, so we have about 700 million and some in Measure R money. Entirely goes to the San Gabriel Valley cities. And the requirement for that investment is operational improvement and capacity enhancements on the streets. We've already qualified the projects. We've already have recommendations for the board to approve in September. Added to the first batch of projects to the tune of $1 billion. Most of these projects are on city streets. Intersection improvements, left turn lanes, right turn lanes, signal synchronizations in the corridors, parking structures in Monterey Park. And it was amazing some of the collaboration in this process. Because after all of these years of differences in opinion and approach to the 710 project, whether over or under, when we got to this point that the reality kicked in, we had a lot of good conversation and good dialogue with the local cities, including in Monterey Park. Monterey Park actually offered to remove street parking on Garvey to add another lane, because they have 3 lanes in each direction, but 1 lane is dedicated parking lane. In return, they would build off-site parking structures to accommodate the parking that is being removed. So we had a lot of good offers to help make this happen. They understand that their jurisdictions are getting impacted. So the list of the initial batch of projects is already on the Metro website, part of the board. The next one is going to come up very soon before the September board meeting. And then we asked the city public works directors and other representatives, we had a forum for them to have an interface with consultants through Construction Network a few months back. We are going to do it again. After the second round projects are approved, we're going to do it again, based on the priority of the projects that are going in and who's going to go first and what projects. So we will give the consultant industry the opportunity to get in the room with them because they're primary project sponsors. And then down the road as we go, anybody who wants to defer the implementation of their projects to us, then we can always talk about those projects. So this is going to come. But that's generally the scope of all of these projects. There are several freeway interchange improvement projects on those lists. The possibility of the cities deferring to us to do those projects. If those projects are Metro's responsibility, then it would go through our process and procedures. Small businesses get involved and all of that. But with the cities, the contract mechanism is pretty much their policies, what they will do. We are not going to influence those processes. There is another project in Pasadena, that's the Great Separation of Gold Line on California Avenue. That city already deferred to us, so we started the initial cost estimate and evaluation of the scope and all of that, and we will do that project.
So then when the city defers it to Metro, it's that package, therefore it's a smaller package than a large, several interchanges. So if it's smaller than the $3 million, would it still be small business set aside?
It could be, yeah, and again, the small business set aside is to help the small business grow. We had a couple of incidents that it really didn't work that way. It actually became a detriment to the consultant who was trying. We don't want those things to happen. The whole idea is to build more credibility and ability on the consultant side to do more work. So even if we offer it is going to be a business decision, small businesses knowing confidently that they can deliver that project to Prime, discussion we will have. We will have a lot of discussions going forward every step of the way, finding the better way of doing business. And that requires input from the consultants.
The timing for those major ones on the 710 North, is that next fiscal year?
We will start programming those right after September. We do have some cash flow this year that can do a little bit of work, pre-design work pretty much. But bulk of the programming is going to start next summer, 2020.
Would that be PSR, PAD, and then PSNE, or would it go directly into PSNE?
Some of them can go immediately, PAD and PSNE. These are generally qualifying as categorical exemption. When we did the environmental document for the corridor, there were some TSMTDM projects that were embedded in the environmental document at the suggestion of the locals. When the environmental document passed, all of those projects have clearance. But when we went out there discussing the additional funds that we're going to put in that corridor, some of the project sponsors no longer wanted to pursue those TSMTDM projects. So any project that is new is not cleared environmentally. So essentially all of these mobility improvement projects need environmental clearance, but it's bare minimum, again, categorically.
And you're shooting for 7 years from start to finish?
That's my hope. Yeah, makes sense, financially makes sense. Because again, all of these are small projects, we need to get in and out, while the market allows delivery within the budget. Otherwise, be it one-time grant on every one of them, if it drags long and the cost goes up, the city has to carry the rest of them. So that's for the measure our money in San Gabriel Valley cities. There is another $300 million in City of LA and County in East LA for their projects. Those are all multimodal projects, a lot of transit support structures, station site improvements and all of that. So you also need to follow up on those if you're interested in that category of.
And that's not your group, that's the transit group? Or
No, that's our group. Yeah, we still manage the whole program.
Okay.
You mentioned this highway set aside a few years ago. So could you elaborate more what we all learned?
Sure, yeah. You know, our program, be it highways, all of our projects have to go through Caltrans approval process. And it's not an easy process. If a consultant has not been there, done that, the risk is taking up a project just on the dollar value. $3 million, I'm qualified, I'm going to go for it. The question is if it's not getting into it, it's getting out of it. So that assurance, it's a business decision. Do I want to take the risk? I mean, we've had teams of small businesses that were primarily formed of a prime small business and many small businesses, highly qualified. We've also had the combination of small business priming and the large business subbing to them. But remember that 30% requirement for the small business engagement is also including the management of that contract. So you are at the mercy of whether your sub, that is the larger firm, wants to walk you through the process. So the question is, if the small business has not done that and has not done any Caltrans projects, is it the right decision? The other thing is that this whole business of highways, our contracts are A&E contracts. It's all based on qualification. It's, having been a consultant for a few years, it's a very expensive process for businesses to put all of these proposal packages and everything together. So when you put the proposal package, I would say the level of confidence should be about 90%. It's not a give it a shot and let's see if you're going to get it. 90% level of confidence means, yes, I have done this project before or similar projects before, and yes, I walked out of that alive And yes, I enjoy doing this. If there is a no to any one of these, you don't want to do that. You're better off being a sub on a larger project than being a prime on a smaller project. That's my advice. Again, nothing prevents anybody from applying for these projects or competing for these projects, but it's a survival course. You know, a lot of times I get stuck in there and bang my head on the wall trying to get these approvals and get the project done, so I know what it takes. And I've worked for Caltrans for 18 years, so I should be able to do this, but it's the standards that they have to comply with. They have a responsibility and they have the liability. No matter who does the job, ultimately they own the system. So every project that goes out has to have their approval and blessing. If they have any concerns, you may have to do the same design 3-4 times over, variations. Financially, it becomes impossible because all of my contracts are fixed firm price contracts. So when you go for that contract, you should have done your risk assessment that no matter what, I have enough budget to survive. Thank you. Sure, begin.
I have a different type of a question, something that I've been pondering for years. You know, most of the process that we have here with Caltrans approvals and everything is kind of geared towards larger corridor studies and interchange projects. But there's, you know, having driven, you know, the system here for about 38 years in LA, there's a lot of recurring congestion that happens due to, you know, smaller types of operational deficiencies, mostly around like merges, diverges, interchanges. And, you know, to the best of my knowledge, there is really no process. I mean, a lot of these are not multi-million-dollar projects. And to give you an example, so, you know, you can see what types of things I'm talking about. Going north on the 110, going through the tunnels, the variable signage that was put in, you know, a couple of years ago, and allocating lanes on speed and you know, time period basis, those types of little things. Is there a system, either at Metro or Caltrans, that, you know, could be a sustainable program that could look into those types of things that don't require necessarily a PSR or a project report or an environmental document, those types of operational things? You know, sometimes you can get a lot of bang for the buck by types of things, but it requires, you know, just the knowledge and the kind of focus on solution-based analyses, like almost like a VA analysis that you do on a major project, but not necessarily on a project, but just looking at points that we could find little solutions for. You know, what's your opinion on that?
My opinion is that I'm always open to that. But the catch is consultants like you, I see you as an expert in this kind of operational improvements, ITS and all that. If you come in with a very focused advice, that this is a no-brainer. If you do this, there's going to be improvements. You put the money in. But if it requires to go in and do multiple studies to see what the options might be, or whether this works better versus the other and all of that, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We will listen, but if we can get to the results with that focused investment, anything better than the current condition is a good investment. Current condition is just out of question. It's not sustainable. It only gets worse as we go forward. But look at I was talking about land use policies. If the jobs don't go with new development, new residential development, you have a problem. In the past few years, when there is more and more residential development in core downtown area, now you see the effect of reverse commute out of it. The difference is that when you're coming in the morning and leaving in the evening, you can play with the signal timings, with the coupling of the streets. You have so many options to get the traffic passing. But when you're creating that reverse movement, you have saturated your intersections, where signal timing doesn't work anymore. You don't have flexibility to retime or do anything, you get stuck. So population growth is a factor. Where that population lives is a factor. Whether jobs go with it or not, it's a factor. So we're talking about VMT, now it's legislated that VMT has to stop because of global warming and all of that. But then yet you see more and more subdivisions in Inland Empire, in San Bernardino, in Riverside, coming to jobs in LA Basin. So we're not doing what we are preaching. So from the smallest thing to the largest investment, we are open. If there is a focused suggestion of how we can make it better, we will invest. Yes?
So in the conversation, I think I heard a lot about, how the program or the need for highway improvements is sort of has fallen behind, and you're either playing catch up or you're having to just follow along. What's an area in highways that's leading? Like, is it ITS? What makes you like excited about like what the ITS group is doing in terms of what it can do for congestion improvement?
What we are trying to do is to identify quick turnaround capacity. That's the biggest piece missing. If you don't have the infrastructure, there's nothing you can do. Everything is just a patch. If you don't have lanes to drive on, everything else is moot. Operational improvements, how are you going to improve the operation? There is a roadway here that is saturated. Consider traffic as a river. Traffic flow is exactly what a river does. The water will dig its way through. If you block and put a dam, it's going to start digging on the side. Ultimately, it goes where it's supposed to go. Traffic is the same. So on one hand, total objection to added capacity, new freeways, widening of the existing infrastructure, leads to traffic spilling over to the cities. Then the cities come up with the ideas of complete streets, choking it down, bicycle lanes, remove a lane, and all of that. Okay? So the traffic is already coming down the freeway because there is no capacity there. You're choking it right where you have to accommodate it to go through. It will go to the next level. And then the complaint comes, lost quality of life in the neighborhoods. What do you expect? You let it that way. You allowed it to happen. So thinking should be critical thinking. Nothing in this business is dogmatic. Nothing in this business is disconnected. We cannot put separate funding in the highways, separate funding in active transportation, separate funding in complete streets and all of that. It all has to work. So it's not anybody's call to make the primary roadway in the city a restricted capacity street. Traffic is going to be next block. And then when it's unleashed, bringing it back together is difficult. Sepulveda Pass, 405. When major construction went into widening for the HOVs, with all of that construction, $1 billion investment, everybody came back and says, but it's still jammed. Well, what do you expect? It's supposed to be jammed. But jamming is now the traffic that used to run on your city streets, now it's back on the freeway. That's a good thing. You invest in the freeway, yes, it's still congested because we built over the decades 1 out of 3 freeways that were supposed to be built. If you look at the grid of the freeway back in the 50s, many of those freeways.
Every 5 miles there was supposed
yes.
to be a street.
Look at San Fernando Valley, 405, next freeway was Reseda, next freeway was Topanga, and then all of those would end in a Pacific Coast freeway, collector distributor that would distribute all of this traffic elsewhere. None of those were built.
And Roscoe.
And Roscoe. And the freeway east-west between Sherman Way and 101. So now everybody says 101 is jammed. Obviously, you killed two freeways parallel to 101, 405 is jammed. Obviously, you kill three freeways parallel to 405. What do you expect to happen?
Don't forget the Laurel Canyon Freeway.
Yes.
And the Whittown Freeway.
Yes, and what was compromised? The freeway mobility while population growth was expected. 101 and 405 each were designed for about 180,000 trips a day. Today, they are carrying more than 320,000 apiece. Imagine what happens at 101, 405 interchange. Shot dead anytime during the day. These are the decisions that need to be made properly, wisely, with a lot of thinking ahead. I'm going to do this, and people are not going to drive. Who says? If we build transit, people are not going to drive. It never happened. They kept driving. Not only that, but more and more of them. Each one of these modes has a purpose. Each one of these modes has a reason. Each one of these modes has its users. Okay. I was a hardcore driver. All my life, I drove. I love cars. And I love driving. I don't like congestion. So when my trip from downtown home in the evening became 2 hours for 30 miles, I switched to Metrolink. Okay? So I'm taking Metrolink. But from where I am, I don't have a light rail option, and even if I had, the light rail option would not be a commuter usage for me or any other. Commuter train is the best alternative for freeway demand. It runs with minimum stops. It runs at the time of peak hour, peak period in the morning, peak period in the evening. But in order to encourage more people to get on it, you've got to provide services in the midday gap. If you provide, Santa Clarita is a good example, right? If you could go back at noon, you wouldn't drive in the morning. But a lot of that traffic comes down in cars because if they have to go back midday, there is no way to go back. If I have to go for an emergency midday, I don't have a way to go back. So that's what triggers car demand. It's the necessity, not the convenience. Yes, Bob?
You hit a major point that I've never been able to convince anybody. We have the Metrolink line that goes from Santa Clarita to Palmdale, downtown LA. Then we have the Ventura County line that comes in. Then we have, going out, we have the San Bernardino line and the Orange County line. Never been able to get anybody at Metrolink to understand that people behave like freeways. Somebody like Don may be coming down the 5 and then go out the San Bernardino freeway. And other people cross downtown. And under the Metrolink, even though the run-through tracks are being prescribed, they're not thinking in terms of a through trip. If you get on in Ventura County on the Ventura County line and it continues down to, from the commuter hours, it continues down to Tustin, you've got certain trips that normally you're forced to drive your car, but if the trains intersect, it's the same thing with the San Bernardino line. If you take the 4 a.m. trip, San Bernardino line gets to Union Station at 5:50, but the train leaving to San Bernardino leaves at 5:45. And there's no, so how, if anybody actually understood what you just said and applied that same logic to the Metrolink crossing, having two corridors instead of the 4 legs coming in, would that affect or change? I mean, you're on top of something that could really change Los Angeles County.
Yeah.
But how do you get the people, I mean, you get it, but how do you get elected officials that could ask staff to look at it at Metrolink or get it through Metro to look? What would be done? I mean, do you see any potential there?
I see potential, but the potential is how many voices are raised and heard.
Well, I mean, that part I understand.
From the staff side, we say it day in, day out. But outside influence is necessary. What Vigen was saying, I understand and I know and I'm confident that with bare minimum investment, you can make a difference. That voice needs to be heard. That's the job of the consultant industry. Come in, RFP or not, tell us what RFP should be issued. Don't wait for an RFP to come out to bid for it. What RFP should be issued? Where is the benefit to the agency? Where is the benefit to the public? Public is taxing themselves for benefits. If we spend that money and there is no benefit, we have betrayed the trust. So it's all hands, everybody involved in this process. If the agency leadership hears the expense, they will absolutely follow on that lead. But if the question is always, when is your RFP coming up? When is your RFP coming up? That's a routine inquiry that if there is a job, I will do it. What we should have is, this is the job you should be doing, not this one. This is a lousy RFP, this is not gonna work. I need this one to come out and I will bid for it.
Well, county MPOs have call for project times, right? That's when the consultants come and
We need a call for advice.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we gave you, you guys did that, and we gave you advice, and you threw it all in the shitter and did something else.
What did I do?
Well, not you, but I mean, all the people in the project, you guys, give us ideas, give us ideas. We give you ideas, tell you how to pay for them, and you go, no, we don't like that idea, and yet you're still over there gonna convert the HOV lanes on Sepulveda, and we told you you could pay for a portion of, or a lot of that tunnel potentially, with the revenues off that project, as well as all the infrastructure that need to go in, and you were like, no, we're not gonna do that. We're just gonna put a PDA out for a $9 billion tunnel and hope that we get somebody that's gonna figure out a way to make it pay. When we told you how to pay for it. And that's the frustrating part from our side, on the industry side, is you ask for RFPs, we give you ideas and even give you the financial plan, and then, you know, and I know that's not your group,
No,
that's Colin and those
yeah.
guys, but they just go, we don't like that, we're gonna do this.
I hear you, but at least in my part, I'm trying to behave. I'm trying to do the right thing. Hold me accountable if I don't listen, but I mean, yes, there are constraints, there are opinions, there are preferences, there are, you know, biases in what works and what not works. And we have that dialogue among ourselves, among the staff, what works better. I mean, we constantly hear from our own agency partners, why do you keep investing in highways? From the sub-regions, why do you want to keep investing in the freeways? We should be investing in active transportation. We heard, I have repeatedly heard from some of our customers out there that based on their research, average trip, commute trip in their area is 3 miles. Who's going to believe that? Based on what research? But that's something that somebody believes and somebody says, for whatever reason. So my suggestion was, why don't we shut down all the on-ramp from your area to the freeway one day and see if that's true? I mean, it's got to have merit. It's got to have merit. The proposals that come in, we need to look for those. We need to listen. Yes, if there are other issues that to be considered, that's the way life goes. I mean, we can always think, but we can't always choose because of our own constraints. But to the best that is possible, the ideas, putting our heads together, we are looking to it. We are looking into it. So if there's any better way of doing this, if we can do minimum investment in a corridor and provide the same benefit that the maximum investment will provide, it's a no-brainer. That's the way we should move. Yes?
In referring to this Metrolink thing, first of all, you know where the study came from for the average trip is 3 blocks? It was the same kid who did the study on the straws of the turtle. So here we are. The Metrolink thing, when I was on board here, we did just that part. We looked at the Metrolink schedules and we made some modifications and we got them as close as they could so somebody could take those trips, those convenience. The problem that Metrolink has is a railroad that A, was designed for freight operations and not for passenger rail operations. So it's got a signaling issue that they've got to deal with. They corrected some of that with PTC, but they've got that issue. But it's a capacity issue. It's the same issue that Abdullah was talking about with the highways. Metrolink has that with capacity. We've got 40,000+ people riding a train network per weekday on what is a lot of single track territory. And it is a big challenge, and some of it's slow. And the run-through tracks are going to be a great help, but they're going to create a whole different challenge, because all of those through moves that we were talking about with run-through tracks now create a whole different attitude on how these stations are going to be operated. So it's there's this give and take on this whole thing, that it's the same thing that you've been talking about for the last, I don't know how long, that, in the highway system, that Metrolink has. And I don't see it getting fixed anytime soon, frankly. I think that it's gonna come with some of the investment that's happening with CalSTA, some of the stuff I'm working on with high-speed rail, that's gonna help. But it's gonna be a challenge over the coming years to make this stuff all happen.
Yeah, I think a lot of our, the layperson or even people that ride Metrolink don't understand that, the concept of single track. I think a lot of people think that just like highways are, two-way, Metrolink and commuter rail is two-way as well. And, they don't understand the concept that a lot of these things are operating just like if you were on a highway, you would be constantly dealing with flagmen. One direction goes and then the other direction goes, and that's a major constraint. And another thing that, going back to what Bart was saying, one of the issues is that when we do studies and system-wide studies, we often just look at capacity deficiencies and needs on either a corridor basis or a segment basis, and we don't look at the needs in terms of like origin destinations a lot. Those are the types of things that I think need to be looked at in order to have like major solutions, as opposed to just, okay, we'll fix this 15-mile segment, we'll fix this interchange or that interchange, but what are we serving? What types of movements are we serving? Is it the Palmdale to Farmville to the valleys movements, or is it Ventura to South Bay movements that we're serving? What is it?
Are we moving the bottleneck, which happens a lot?
But the biggest problem is that, in transportation, we do the planning, right? And there's developments that occur, and the development has to do their planning for traffic and pay for that traffic. But the decision makers, like councilmen and supervisors, they allow communities to be built out in the rural area without paying for the transportation aspect of it.
Yeah. And again, it's the issue of cost of mitigation. A lot of deferred infrastructure investment. Now, if you have a subdivision, if there is sustained development that keeps going phase after phase after phase, you cannot possibly demand that if you're adding 5,000 homes that are destined to job centers in downtown, you gotta add another lane to the freeway. But that's what is needed to get this new trip there. But unrealistic to get the developer to add another lane to the freeway. So it's the nature of the beast.
Right. You gotta stop that developer from developing out of the rural area.
That's the
How they
thing.
build up.
How do you control demand to buy time to think, is it gonna happen? We have a cyclical economy.
Right.
As soon as it starts going up, permits issued, development, subdivision, construction starts, before you go down, everything has to be sold. Now all of a sudden you got another city
Yeah.
that has to get on this freeway. How do you handle that? So it's not going to get better, but there's a lot of catch-up that needs to be done for work that was never done.
Right.
What's possible, we need to push for it. Not doing it is only going to make it a lot worse. At least doing it, it's a remedy. And all modes involved, light rail, commuter rail, bicycle. Yes, if anybody can truly justify that the job centers in city X are only 3 miles away from homes, so be it. That city should be self-sufficient, doesn't need a ramp on the freeway, everything is on the streets, heaven, right?
And as soon as it's planned, then the councilman will say, let's approve it for something else, and have them build it.
Yes.
That's the issue.
If I can insist on my previous question about what is it that highways do you think is has the best opportunity to lead it? Like, what, is it ITS, is it like more efficiency, like more?
What I said, capacity. Capacity is the first thing that needs to happen. Operational improvements in whatever shape or form, correcting the fixes that are needed, gaps that need to be filled, and all of those. Then it comes to ITS. Again, if you don't have the infrastructure, there's not much you can do with managing what you don't have. With that capacity and adding ITS to it, it makes a difference. You need the streets, you do signal synchronization. Technology, right? Signal synchronization allows this traffic to keep moving, right? All of these greens, you keep moving. But if you have only 1 lane or 2 lanes, as opposed to 4 lanes that are needed, there's a huge difference. ITS has a lot more efficiency on a larger capacity roadway than on a smaller capacity roadway. So infrastructure investment, added capacity is what's needed. And nobody should shy away from it. Nowadays, it's a sin if you talk about adding lanes to highways or widening highways. You gotta go to the back room and talk about this. Why? The demand is there. Everybody who is in that room probably drove it. You got stuck on it. Why can't we talk about it?
I guess there's like this unfounded, I don't know, fantasy that technology will solve it before you actually need to build it.
Yeah, and then there's this other thought that if you don't build it, they will give up. But again, if you understand that it's not convenience, it's necessity, you can't give it up.
Something real quick, something that I read about like just the emergence of different technologies in vehicles and and how that's going to change the landscape and how it might create for some period of time like different classes within the, because right now say vehicles for the most part are evenly apt technology wise, but eventually there will be more advanced vehicles with vehicle to infrastructure communications or vehicle to vehicle communications, and we'll be able to do things like platooning and that sort of thing. And they will exist in one class while for a period of time they'll be the minority, and as the shift occurs, there'll be this need to kind of make changes in the infrastructure to kind of accommodate to that new class of, that emerging class of vehicles, and how that's, is going to cost to it, and who's going to pay for that cost? The drivers who are coming up with these new vehicles and they want to be able to use everything that the automobile makers are putting on them, or is it going to be the public where half or more of the old vehicles aren't really making use of vehicle to infrastructure technology?
Yes, and I'm a transportation dinosaur. Okay. The only thing I understand is what will work. When we installed many years ago the information signs, changeable message signs on the freeways, the idea was guidance, right? Freeway jam ahead, expect delays. Okay? And then you could get off the ramp and go around it and bypass that area and do everything. Good luck doing it today. It's there, the information is there, the sign pretty much says, sorry buddy, you're screwed. There's no place to go. All you know is there is 104 minutes of delay ahead. And you're sitting in your car cussing and cursing and there's no place to go. If you're coming from Don's neighborhood, I-5 South, where do you go? The changeable message signs is telling you, if your car can talk to the front car, they're chatting together, okay, we are here for the next 5 hours. What do?
You go to the old road, which is only 2 lanes.
Yes.
And in a subsegment, it's 1 lane,
Yeah.
which is a complete bypass.
Yeah. So again, you need that capacity. We all have GPSs on our cars. You turn on the car in the morning, everything is ready. Okay, the car will tell you just stay home today. That's the best advice the technology can give you. Otherwise, you can't do anything. You just have to get out there. If I have to travel on 101, I have to travel on 101. I can't go around anywhere. If I get on the city streets, it's even worse. Now, this is all non-emergency conditions. Imagine if there is a major earthquake in this basin. Where do you go? Riots when it happened. I was working at Caltrans. They were running from in front of the Caltrans building with rocks and broken. I figured there's something wrong. By the time I got out of the building, streets were jammed, cars were smashed. Between here and San Fernando Valley, 4.5 hours.
And no cell phone.
I know, and yeah, partial cell phones, nothing like this. But 4.5 hours, what do you do? It's ridiculous. Capacity issues, deficiencies, infrastructure deficiency. That's what the major problem is. We can work it out, but it's like having an open wound and keep putting Band-Aids on. It's not gonna work. We do need major investment, and that's what Metro is doing. The dedication of all of this money to highways from an agency that is not core highway responsible, but sees the urgency and sees the benefit. We are doing everything we can with that money. It's a blessing. Recognition that this other mode has value, as opposed to walking away from it and let's do patches and repairs and not build anything anymore because the trips are about 3 miles. Every time we understand and embrace the reality, things will change. Small or large, but will change. When we are in denial, we dug our own graves, we can't do anything.
I just want to say a short sentence. I've been to a lot of Caltrans, projects and work with Caltrans people, District 7 director and all of them. But I haven't seen anybody as excited talking about freeways or highways like you.
I love it.
So it's great. I just
Yeah.
wanted to thank you. This excitement you have for freeways. When you go to Caltrans now, talk to the district director even, or deputy, they're talking about repairing and maintaining and doing this. But you have this passion about freeway.
Yeah.
You know why? Because he's not driving them anymore.
Maybe. But anyway, that's exciting. I got excited about it. So.
See, like today, Bart tied me down here until whenever.
Yeah.
I had to drive, but I left at 5 o'clock, 5:15. Now I'm going back, the longer I'm here, the better. So
Yeah.
we can talk to me now, when the freeway opens.
The freeway's on ice at 5 o'clock, aren't they?
There is no train back.
Well, no, but the people that left here were leaving for the A10.
The people who left
Oh, is
early.
that what it was?
Yeah.
They were all going back to Orange County.
So, absolutely, we should push for more highways.
Absolutely. Let us know what you think, your ideas.
This is a car city.
It is a cost, and it will be a cost until 2020.
But speaking of the
Where
district,
cars hover and nobody is down here.
speaking of district director, have you talked to Jim Imbriorski with District 7? He's got some wild ideas. I mean, really, narrowing the lanes down to eight.
It's filming.
Some real, innovative ideas.
Or Japanese cars.
How about
Anything else?
Oh, one. Hasn't been mentioned. Lane splitting on a motorcycle. The most extreme case of getting around traffic.
They have a lot of guts in this freeway.
How many
I've
fatalities?
passed the
this
law
year?
a couple years ago.
There's usually one a day.
Yeah.
I listen to
It's
traffic
still
reports
happens.
every morning. There's a
It's
motorcycle
legal.
to and down
It's
every day.
legal too.
It's risky. You see how many incidents happen. It's really risky.
And the cost of that.
The legislation I think we need is legislation against people going exactly the speed limit in the number 1 lane.
Amen.
Yeah. Vote for Donald Trump for. Yeah, that'll happen.
We have the same problem with trucks. Traditionally, we are limited to the right lanes on the freeways. Now, I actually took a picture of a truck from my side window in 134 HOV, a semi. I'm sure it's
wife was in the car with him,
I'm sure more many people
sleeping in the back.
So would he be fined $431?
Enforcement. And, you know, again, enforcement is a major issue, because with 134 specifically, that's where there is a lot of violation of occupancy in that HOV lane, because the main line is jammed. Even if there is a CHP on the roadway, it can't catch up with them. So as soon as you get in there, you just floor it to get to 101, 170 split. So you see a good 60–70% of those cars with one person.
I think just like we regulate express lanes and all of that with technology or, you know, permits or stickers or, you know, EVs and things like that, I think my personal opinion is with the, as you know, jammed up as the regular HOV lanes are now, I think HOV lanes should be reserved to, you know, regulated carpoolers and buses and vans.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to just, you know, a family carpooling together doesn't take cars off the road. You know, so it's you know, we have the technology to regulate that at some point.
And get rid of all those EV stickers.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's
No,
Can I agree to this rule?
I know he's
Can't
got.
make everybody.
Not unorganized.
See you. Take care.
I want to thank everybody for coming and giving them a hand.